Welcome into the show. I'm Dan McLaughlin. Tonight, we're talking about 100 things Cardinals fans should know and do before they die. The author of that book is Derrick Goold from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Derrick, great to see you. This should be a lot of fun, and let's start with this. Over 100 years of St. Louis Cardinals baseball, and you had to come up with 100 things that would interest Cardinals fans. So how did you break it down? How did you come up with 100 things to write about?
You know, one of the things I looked at, Dan, was trying to make a list of things that had to be in there, things that I wanted to find out more about that could be in there, and then also sprinkle in some things that people could do. It wasn't just kind of reciting history or reciting lore or mentioning great players, so many of whom, fans and readers knew all about, but what could they go out and do as well? Like, what are some places they could go, or what are some history that they could experience? And maybe, find some things that you could unearth that maybe they just don't know about, or give some background to. So I tried to find a mix of it. When you do it that way, you're not just kind of going with the 100 greatest players or the 100 biggest dates or the 100 most important highlights. You kind of find a mix of things, and you'll find that the 100 fills up really quick.
So what did the book teach you about Cardinals history?
So much. It gave me a chance to, I obviously talk with a lot of people who are part of Cardinals history, who have researched Cardinal history, who have researched St. Louis baseball history. One of the things for the book that I really enjoyed doing was taking a tour with a local historian about all the ballparks that existed in St. Louis, and where there are plaques now to say, hey, this is where, say, the Union team played, or this is where the original Cardinals played. This is obviously the side of Sportsman's Park, those kind of things. I got a chance to kind of see how rich the baseball history is in St. Louis that includes the Cardinals, but not as exclusive to the Cardinals. I really enjoyed that. But, being able to talk with the people involved in the history, talking to, go back to talking to George Kissel, the late George Kissel, or talking to the late Bob Gibson. I know that had a really, really wonderful talk with him over lunch once down there in Jupiter, just about, not just his career, but by doing the book, I was able to ask about a bunch of different people and their careers, a bunch of different moments, some that he wasn't around for and maybe he just heard of, or some that were going on in the moment, like a Molina or a Pujols, to kind of ask them, ask some of the icons of the organization about some of the people in the present, was really, it gave me kind of a fresh perspective on how generational the Cardinals are.
Certainly, you can't write a book about the Cardinals without writing about Stan the Man. So what did you learn about Stan that maybe you didn't know about Stan before?
Well, you get a real sense of how remarkable that 48 season, right? You think about like how long it's been since there was a Triple Crown winner and how close he came, and the legend of the rained out home run. There were a lot of different things like that through the course of the book. It's like, okay, the legend, can you go find the truth? The rained out home run, was it gone? What would it have counted as? Was it indeed rained out? And then what that would have meant for him as far as tying for the league lead in home runs. Just a remarkable season. I think also just in doing the research, you get a chance to kind of wind the clock back a little bit to the day that he retired and how many National League records he retired with. Many of them have been surpassed. Some have been surpassed. A lot of them have been surpassed. But you think about, like, Hank Aaron had yet to surpass them. Pete Rose had yet to surpass them. The day he retired, Stan Musial retired with so many National League records that you think, like, the conversation at that point in time had to be about, is he the greatest National League player of all time? And now, to kind of put that in perspective, I was able to do that with the book, just kind of look at that moment in time and appreciate the career that was coming to a close. And also the fact that he hit a home run as a grandfather, which is kind of cool, and not too many folks can say that. So much of the treasures that he got through his career are with the Cardinals in the Hall of Fame there. I got a chance to talk with Brian Finch about that, and go through some of the gifts that he gave them and the little tokens that have a story behind each one. You'd ask how I come up with 100 or how I narrowed it down to 100. Probably could have spent 100 on the different souvenirs and mementos and moments from his career alone.
The 100th anniversary of the Birds on the Bat logo is here, and the story of how that came about, it's a fun story, and you've got that in the book.
Yeah, so in 1921, this is February 1921, there was a luncheon in Ferguson, Missouri. Branch Rickey, general manager who was running the Cardinals at the time. But in 1921, February 1921, he goes off to this luncheon. Branch Rickey sits down, and they're decorating the table are cutouts of redbirds, and they are on string, which is meant to represent twigs. But, you know, Rickey, ever inventive, ever creative, sees a bat. And by the next year, 1922, the logo that everybody knows and loves and is considered one of the greatest logos in sports, certainly in baseball, you know, the birds on a bat, the two birds dueling on a bat, you know, growling towards each other, if that's something that birds do, Dan, kind of came into play there in 1922. And here we are coming up on 2022. So the name, the Cardinals, has been around for a lot longer than the logo, but the logo got its launch 100 years ago because of the contribution of decorations at this luncheon. And it's really a global logo when you think about it. You look at photos of places and gatherings around the world, and you'll see a Cardinals hat and sometimes you'll see the redbird, or you'll see a Cardinals jersey like Colton Parayko walked into Target Field with before the Winter Classic. Well, that logo that he wore on an Adam Wainwright jersey got its start 101 years ago, and then hit jerseys 100 years ago because of this meeting in Ferguson.
Coming up, iconic players like Bob Gibson, Lou Brock, Albert Pujols, and others are featured in the book. And we'll get into that. That's next on Scoops with Danny Mac. Scoops with Danny Mac on Fox 2 is brought to you by Schnucks, Ryan Kelly, the home loan expert, Lou Fuse, Triad Bank, Lordo's Diamonds, your family's jeweler for life, and the Missouri Athletic Club, 2 clubhouses, 1 platinum club. Welcome back to the show. My guest is Derrick Goold from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and he is the author of 100 Things Cardinals Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die. Derrick, Cardinals baseball has not only been defined by great players and championships, but by the characters that they have had as well. The iconic announcers like Jack Buck, the recently retired Mike Shannon, Harry Carey, for all those years. And when I mentioned that trio, what did you learn about that trio that has meant so much to fans for so many years?
I think, you get a sense of not just the moments they called, but the resonance and the echo that they gave those moments. I was really interested in trying to find out more. Certainly learning about Harry Carey was something, and the years that he spent, because, for folks our age, Dan, we think of WGN mostly and Harry Carey calling the Cubs games. But he was so long here with the Cardinals and called so many great moments and really brought such charisma and, like you said, character to the radio call. I got a chance to learn about that and really understand it better. What I came to the book with was a knowledge of how widespread those voices were, because they could reach 48 states with KMOX. And I wanted to better understand that, just not just because, I grew up with a grandfather who was a Cardinal fan in Wisconsin because he could get KMOX, or because I went to New Orleans and I heard all about the calls of Mike Shannon and Jack Buck because they could get KMOX. And even where I grew up in Colorado, there was an area where you could get KMOX, so much so, and the Cardinals were so popular there that they won a poll by the Denver Post at the time, before the Rockies showed up, for who the newspaper should adopt as the region's team. The Cardinals won. That had to do with just the reach of the signal, but also like the power of the voices carrying the Cardinal games. Jack Buck was someone you wanted to listen to tell stories, call a game, because of the stories he could tell. Same with Mike Shannon. I think, in research in the book, I came to really appreciate not just Shannon, the radio broadcaster, but also just Mike Shannon, the Cardinals lifer. I mean, that's a tremendous group that you're talking about there, of folks who are not just Cardinal for a time in their life, but really part of the life of the Cardinals, as those broadcasters are.
How about some great players you write about? And we'll start with Bob Gibson.
Sure. I mean, a guy who changed the game. How many pitchers can say that the rules of the game had to change because he was so dominant? That would be like what today, them saying, hey, look, Mariano Rivera, you can't throw a cutter anymore. They didn't do that. Instead, everybody copied that cutter. Now, no one quite threw it as well as Rivera, or still hasn't thrown it quite as well as Rivera, but it would be like that. You know, they said, look, this guy, Bob Gibson, too dominant. Let's change the height of the mound because we got to get this game back in order. He's solved baseball. I enjoyed not only talking to him, but talking to people about him as they spoke in both reverent and also fearful tones because of how intimidating he could be. I like the fact when you hear all the legends, right, and you're like, well, the facts can't live up to the legends. So often with Gibson, they did. In fact, all the time they did. You know, they're not talking to guys. Joe Torre talking about how an all-star game he wouldn't talk to him. But also you get a sense, and Dan, you know this well, just about what a good and devoted friend he was. You got that sense with Tim McCarver and the stories he tells about Gibson, and that Joe Torre tells about being a teammate with Gibson and a lifelong friend with him then. You get that sense and how protective Gibson was, not just of his performance and his legacy, but what it meant for him to be a part of the Cardinals at a time when the game and the country was changing all around him.
If it's not the best trade, it's one of the best, and that's Lou Brock.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and that was fun talking to Lou about the moment when he has the conversation about what the Cardinals need from him. And does that line up with the player he wants to be? And I was really fascinated. He's kind of walked through that they needed him to steal bases, to generate kind of, chaos at times on the field, get things in motion because he had the speed, he had the ability, he would get on base. And they needed that guy. And he's like, well, wait a minute, power is what still, I mean, you think about how we look at home runs and how much they pay now. He's like, well, I want to be a complete ball player. I want to hit for power. I want to hit for average. I want to do these things. I don't just want to steal. And the notion that, well, this is what the Cardinals need from you at this time. And then he goes out there and does it better than anybody ever had. To that point.
Well, you covered him. What did you learn and what did you take away from watching Albert Pujols?
So from watching Albert Pujols, I mean, you just get this. I mean, he's a metronome at the plate when he was with the Cardinals, just constantly keeping the beat of an MVP level player. The definition of a modern middle order hitter, not just a guy who goes out there and hits for power, but a guy who obviously we know hit for average there during the decade. The first decade with the Cardinals, would have had a lot more MVPs had he not overlapped with, a guy like Barry Bonds early on in his career. Probably should have one more MVP when you look back on the time. I think, just how he came out of being a late round draft pick, how, devoted he was to the craft of hitting and committed he was to proving people wrong. I think that's something that showed up, a lot in talking with him or talking with others about him is, what he demanded of himself and how driven he was by any sort of chip that he could find. If he felt slighted in some way, a vote that didn't go his way for the MVP, a call that didn't go his way for a strike, he'd find some motivation there. But he just was a relentless craftsman when it came to how to be a hitter and how to maintain his swing and maintain his approach. I also, it was while working on the book that I was able to, we talked about like kind of the legends that you try to report and research and find out if they're fact. I was able to kind of work at the part of a story that I later put together for the newspaper about how the Cardinals almost traded him and what that would have been like had they gone and traded Albert Pujols to the Padres for a backup catcher, and the work like Mike Jorgensen and others did to assure Galen Pitts, for example, the manager at AAA Memphis, who had heard about this right-handed hitter and asked if he might be part of the playoff roster there for the Memphis team because really could use a guy who could hit left-handed pitching. And of course, Albert Pujols could hit left-handed pitching. But this notion like how close they came as the Padres were interested in Pujols and what they did to kind of move him off the radar and go in a different direction for that trade.
Coming up, iconic Cardinal moments. That's next on Scoops with Danny Mac. Scoops with Danny Mac on Fox 2 is presented by the Ascension Charity Classic, Stratum Structural Systems, Royal Banks of Missouri, Hair Saloon for Men, and Family Golf and Learning Center.
Play your best.
Welcome back to the show. My guest is Derrick Goold from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and he is the author of 100 Things Cardinals Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die. Now, there have been so many incredible moments over the years, and how do you nail it down to be in the top 100? Well, I wanted to just touch on a few and get backstories on these great moments. And Derrick, let's start with hard-hitting Mark Whiten, and that's something that Cardinal fans and a night they will never, ever forget.
The 4 home runs, not too many people saw because it happened in the middle of the night, right? So I always like that part of the story that, it was a game there in Cincinnati, remarkable game. But to watch it unfold and to know what time of day it was happening adds to it. I wonder how many folks woke up to this surprise of history having been made. It stands out along with like the 5 home run doubleheader by Musial as this point in time that all other performances will be compared to.
I've got a soft spot in my heart for this one. That's Rick Ankiel and his second act, a broadcast partner, great friend. It was remarkable to see him come back.
You knew how athletic he was, how gifted he was, and that he had power in his swing. But for him to then start over, essentially, go back to the minors, recreate himself, and then return as a major leaguer, not, because of novelty, but because he had earned it and just mashed his way up and become a tremendous defensive center fielder too, back to the majors, to arrive as he did dramatically, and then, to go to Coors Field there where he was in center field and made 2 of the most remarkable throws anybody will ever see. By the throws that Rick made from deep center field, one of the deepest parks, all the way to third base. Troy Gloss, I think if I remember correctly, on a dime to get the runners who were equally caught in disbelief. Just a remarkable story, a 2-way talent who then, almost he came back as a pitcher before his elbow gave away.
So many great moments at Wrigley, but what about Stan's 3,000th hit?
Yeah, so and the wish of Stan to get it at home, wanting to get it at home, then having to go into the game at Wrigley Field and deliver the 3,000th hit. One of my favorite parts of that is not just that he wanted to kind of wait but couldn't even contain himself. He hit. He constantly hit. Was then when they get back to St. Louis and overcome by all the people there and everybody, all the fans there to greet him and celebrate him, and the fact that he didn't get that hit, at home for them all to see, but they were still there to welcome him home. And then he declares that there's no school the next day. I just love that. I love the fact that he was caught up in the emotion, sees the fans, knows how late it is, and says, "Yeah, I'm calling off school tomorrow." Like that. Of course, Stan Musial should have the power to call off school. That I think he should.
Molina's 2006 postseason hit against the Mets.
Yeah. So that game, I've probably written more about that game than any other game, to be honest. It was a remarkable game, Game 7 at Shea in Queens, the National League Championship Series. Just think about all the moments that he had, not just the home run that carried the Cardinals to the win, but getting Jeff Suppan through that bases-loaded situation after the Scott Rowland error. In the 9th, as everything's kind of rising there and the Mets have the guy they want at the plate and the situation they want, and he's a swing away from delivering a pennant to Queens, it's Molina that goes out, talks to the rookie Adam Wainwright, and on his way back improvises a new approach and gets there. And you can watch the video and says, hey, makes a motion to Wainwright to pat his chest to say, hey, trust me here. We're switching things up. Goes with the changeup. Wainwright's really third, fourth best pitch at that time, and gets him through, sets Beltran up. That whole bat builds from there. And I'm struck by just how much influence he had on that game, how much confidence he had in his read on that game, and how much faith the team had, particularly his teammates and those pitchers, put in him so early in his career.
Final question, what do you hope that fans take away from the book?
Well, I hope they learned something they did not know. There's some tidbits in there that I believe were the first time reported. Just some background on things. I hope they. I joke that it's a good bathroom read because it's short and subtle, and sometimes the stories are sweet. But I hope they're all informative, and I hope they're all entertaining. But most of all, I hope they walk away with knowing something that they didn't about the players or the moments or the team they know so well.
Thanks, Derrick, and great job with the book.
Thank you, Dan.
For Derrick Goold, I'm Dan McLaughlin, and I'll see you next Sunday right here on Fox 2.